I'm starting YouTube and I'm waiting. Once YouTube gets started, then we will get started. It looks like the map is working relatively quick, so that's good. All right, I'm opening up YouTube really quick. All right, doing a search for Theology Central. There we are. How do we sound? Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. All right, All right, closing that. All right, then I'm going to go over here. Going to go to webcast, maybe. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other broadcasts. You see, one's been on for 18 minutes, so they'll be broadcasting for a while. The other one for 20 minutes, the other one for 23 minutes, the one for 13 minutes, and one for 46 minutes. So all of these will be going on while I am broadcasting, so you can always pick one of those. 18 minutes, so they'll be broadcasting for a while. You can go listen to them if you would so desire. All right. And let's see if we can get this accomplished today. All right. There's a lot of other things I need to do, but this is one that is ready to go. I want to do some more work on our 5 layers, and but yeah, we got to finish the great Satan hunt. We got to finish that up. We have to finish this, what we're doing right now, and there's some other things we need to clean up, and then we can maybe dedicate more time to the whole 5 layers concept that I really want to flesh out a little bit more. But in the meantime, let's do this. I'll just give it a second. Oh, wow. The numbers are working. So if you're listening, thank you so very much. Oh, we have someone from Ontario listening. Canada showing up. It's a little early, guys. The Canadians don't start listening to me till sometime after midnight. That's typically, if I do a late night broadcast, it's made up of 90% of people from Canada. If I broadcast during the day, it's usually North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia. That's where most of the live broadcast listeners come from during the day. At night, it's Canada. So I think there's a law in Canada saying you're not allowed to listen to the Theology Central podcast during the day. I think there's laws against it. So no, I'm joking. I do appreciate it. And here we go. This should be fun. And we're going to do something, well, I think others are not going to do. And I hope that will prove to be beneficial. So are you ready, ladies and gentlemen? We go live in 5, 4, 3, 2. Dramatic pause. And 1.
Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday, February the 4th, 2026. It is currently 1:40 p.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from the Theology Central studio, located right here in Abilene, Texas. Well, it all started with an announcement. Does everyone remember the announcement? Do I need to read the announcement to you? Let me read the announcement. It all started with this announcement. Teaching has long been a passion of mine. Even before I took my first university position at Rutgers in 1984, gulp, 41 years ago, after 4 years there, I moved to Chapel Hill and have taught in the Religious Studies Department here since 1988. And now I have decided it is time for me to retire. This semester will be my last. As of January the 1st, 2026, I will be gainfully unemployed. Now, that announcement was given by Dr. Bart Ehrman, Some will say the leading Bible skeptic for the last 30 plus years, all right? Or, almost 40 years of teaching, 37 years, I think, teaching at Chapel Hill. He has written countless books that sold millions of copies. He has been perceived by many within Christianity to be public enemy number one. Some see him as a Bible scholar. Some see him as a Bible denier. Some see him as a Bible critic. However you view him, the one thing you cannot deny is that Bart Ehrman has been massively influential. So I decided to create a series to kind of, talk about Bart Ehrman, his story, his influence, the challenges he gave the church, and then, of course, cue up his final lecture, his farewell lecture, and then listen to the entire thing, and then maybe wrap the series up with some, theological, hermeneutical, thoughts and ideas, and in some ways kind of summarizing his entire career. Now, Bart Ehrman is not going to go away. He'll still be writing books. He'll still be speaking. He just will not be in the classroom there at Chapel Hill anymore. So, but I want to review his entire farewell lecture, his farewell address, and I have it queued up. Now, if you did not listen to the first message, I would challenge you to go listen. I think I did a pretty good job of summarizing his life, how he kind of became this skeptic, this critic, this agnostic to this person who just says, I don't know. That story, I think, is pretty fascinating and kind of what led him there. And I could talk all day about that. And then I think the challenges he left the church are very important. And I think in many cases, the church hasn't done a very good job of accepting those challenges. And I will say once again, and I know I tick off a lot of Christians, the reason Bart Ehrman was so influential and so successful is because the church has been such an abysmal failure. Anything Bart Ehrman said, that anyone who's gone to church for more than 15 minutes should have yawned and said, I've heard this in Sunday school. I know about textual variants. I know about these problems. I know about these difficulties. I've struggled with them. We wrestle with them. We do not hide from them. We talk about them and we deal with them all the time. Every time the Bible is open in my church, we deal with these issues. But the church doesn't do that. No. The church hides from difficulty and uncertainty and problems and all of these issues. And so then what happens, someone goes to church for, most of their life, end up in a university, and then they're confronted with this, and the stack of cards come collapsing down. Well, it wouldn't have come collapsing down if the church would spend more time actually wrestling with the things of God, wrestling with scripture, wrestling with doubt, wrestling with questions, struggle, being realistic and being honest, instead of creating this kind of fantasy version of Christianity where everything makes sense and there's an answer to everything. No. And so people are not prepared. The church is more worried about potlucks, fellowships, activities, different ministries. I don't know. It's a joke. And young people, it's more about pizza parties, lock-ins, and playing stupid games and being silly than actually dealing with real difficult issues. So if you want to talk about why is Bart Ehrman successful, because the church, for the most part, is a joke. And I'm going to continue to say that. And I've been saying that for 30 years, I feel like. So the church failed and Bart Ehrman was there. And if the church would have been doing its job, anything Bart Ehrman would have said, everybody would have just said, yeah, we talk about this in church all the time. Where have you been? Well, welcome to the party. You showed up way late, but that's not the way it happened and the way it went down. And so I've talked about I've talked about everything. You can go back and listen to the first message in this. But are you ready? Let's go to Chapel Hill. Let's walk into Bart Ehrman's class. Let's find a seat. We'll sit somewhere in the back since, we're not actual students. We'll kind of sit in the back. We'll bring our notebooks. We'll bring our minds, thinking, logic, reason. And we're going to hear what Bart Ehrman had to say for his final lecture. Now, what I have done is I have fast forward through, I skipped all of the kind of tribute and all of those wonderful words said about Bart Ehrman. You're going to hear the applause. Bart Ehrman's going to walk up and he's going to begin his lecture. This lecture is long. It's probably an hour and a half. There's no way I can review this in one episode. So I'll try to find a perfect stopping point, and then we'll do 2 or 3 episodes to work through his entire final lecture. And remember how I do these reviews. I'm going into this review just as if we just walked into the class and we're going to listen to this together in real time. I did not listen to it first. I did not take it apart. I've already watched some Christians on YouTube, the way they go through and rip out some sound bites so that they can criticize whatever. I'm not playing that game. I'm going in to listen to what he has to say. And you know what? And I know Christians don't like this. I don't care about the Christian side. I don't care about the skeptic side. I just care about truth, facts, accuracy, and I don't care who that offends or who it doesn't. So we're just going to go through this. I'm going to give thoughts, but it's going to be thoughts in real time, right? This is not, I'm going to go through and, I'll jump in at this point and I'll say this. That's a performance. That's not being real. So we're going to go to Chapel Hill. We're going to sit down. We're going to go to Chapel Hill. We're going to sit down together and we're going to listen to Bart Ehrman give his final lecture, and then we'll talk about it as it is occurring. And then when it's all said and done, after, 3 episodes of this, then we'll summarize and reflect and discuss and talk, and we'll see where we are when we get there. I can't plan that because I don't know where we're going to go. I don't know how many twists and turns this is going to take. Who knows? This could end up leading to 5 other separate series because I never know what's going to happen when we go in. But are you ready? I have a pencil. I do have a Bible. I have an iPad right here. And shh. Okay? We're in class. Be quiet. Okay? Stop messing around. Pay attention. Bart Ehrman is about to give his final lecture, and we're going to listen. Here we go.
Well, thank you. Is this okay? Is the mic on? Can you hear me okay? Good. Yeah, well, thank you, Mark, I think. And thank you, Hugo. I was going to say I'm speechless, but that's probably not a good thing, right? Got to give a speech. So I've been very lucky to have such brilliant colleagues over the years. Both at Duke, back in the days when Ed Sanders and Dale Martin were there, and today when Mark Goodacre and Jennifer Knust are there. These are brilliant scholars of the New Testament, all of them. And at Chapel Hill, my department that Hugo's in, we have an amazing department with amazing colleagues. And it makes all the difference for a scholar being around really smart people with really good ideas with whom you can debate. So that's all good. And so thank you. Thank you very much. I had good colleagues when I was at Rutgers as well.
I do, and I know I don't want to get too far off track, but I want to put forth an idea that I sometimes struggle with, right? Because if you look at church culture, right? Here he's talking about having colleagues who are brilliant, who are maybe even smarter than you, who you can debate with, who can challenge you. These people who are considered scholars of the New Testament, who have spent their lives studying the New Testament, its structure, its content, the manuscripts behind it. These people have spent their lives, dedicated their lives to the study of that. So that's speaking of it in an academic world, right? But when we look over at the church culture, I'm sometimes kind of confounded and confused by church culture, right? Because Christians who have by no means can even claim to be a New Testament scholar, an Old Testament scholar, a biblical scholar. Many of the average person sitting in the pew have barely even read any major textbook on biblical criticism, textual variants, manuscripts. They haven't done any of that. At the very most, if they feel challenged by an atheist or an agnostic, they'll run to a Christian apologetics podcast, get some basic arguments, feel like that they're qualified, and then basically say, all of these experts, all of these scholars, they're all wrong, they're all idiots because I have it figured out. So I've often, I see it this way. In church, it is, and I know even if it's not articulated this way, this is the way the church operates. That the average Christian who's never gone to college, university, they've never studied, and even if they've gone to college or university, they did not go to college or pursue any higher education in biblical studies, theological studies, hermeneutics, nothing along those lines. They went for whatever field of study that they pursued for the career that they are working in, right? So, but within the church, here is kind of the mindset. The average Christian who's never pursued any massive amount of education when it comes to the Bible, scripture, theology, or hermeneutics, it operates this way that individual can not only open the Bible, read the Bible, interpret the Bible, but that individual can then even judge if what is preached is true or false, make a declaration whether it's true or false, and then either work to get that pastor fired, to get him removed, bring in another pastor, or leave that church to go find a church that agrees with their conclusion, or start another church. See, within Christianity, though all those years of study are ultimately meaningless and useless because the average person in the pew can just say, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. It doesn't matter how many years these people have spent studying the Bible. Just an average Christian sitting in a pew can just determine that anyone is right and anyone is wrong based on their conclusion. In many cases, that conclusion is not even built upon years of intensive study. And I don't understand how that functions as a system, and no one raises their hand and go, wait a minute. Well, first, if that's the case, why do we even send pastors to Bible college or seminary? Since the people in the pew are going to be the ones judging and determine if that seminary, university-trained pastor is right or wrong, and they're going to do so based off very little actual study of their own. I don't get how the system operates. It's like all the study is useless because the people who will determine whether that person preaching and teaching is right is just some person sitting in the pew who just says, nope, that's not what Romans means. Nope, that's not what Hebrews means. Nope, you're right, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And if you go to them, go, whoa, okay, so you're thinking this entire system of theology is wrong? Okay, could you show me your study? They don't have to produce study. They don't have to produce anything. And it's really odd. It's just so, it's like within Christianity, it almost creates this atmosphere of superiority that I can just open my Bible and go, you're wrong. And I don't even have to demonstrate anything. So he's talking about being in an environment with all of these very well-educated people. And the church is an environment of people who act as if they are experts without ever having to do any work to be an expert. I don't know. It's very... how do you understand church culture? Do you ever sit back and just kind of look at the way it operates and see if it makes any sense? I'm confounded by it, but let's see where else he goes.
I was at Rutgers for 4 years, and teaching at Rutgers was a little different from teaching at Chapel Hill. Rutgers was in New Jersey, and it still is. And so the most of my students at Rutgers were not evangelical Christians. I had some evangelicals, but I had a number of Jewish students, and I had a lot of Roman Catholic students. And that was interesting because the things that my students at Rutgers got upset about are not things that my students at Chapel Hill get upset about. At Rutgers, every semester, I would get comments on my teaching evaluations complaining that Ehrman thinks that Jesus had brothers. Because in the Roman Catholic tradition, Mary's a perpetual virgin, so she didn't have other children. And that was the one thing they were upset about. Contradictions in the Bible, implausible things that didn't happen, like that didn't faze them a bit. They're Catholic. They hadn't read the Bible. But man, Mary having children, no, man, that can't be right. But it's very different when I moved to the South. And it only took me about 2 weeks to realize how different it was. Moved here, 1988. 2 weeks after I moved here, I got a phone call from from a reporter at the Raleigh News and Observer, who wanted to ask me a question. This is August 1988, and he wanted to know, is it true that Jesus is coming back next month?
That is funny. It makes me laugh because it does demonstrate that how different, especially maybe more so then, how the cultures could be so radically different, right? Maybe today everyone can be influenced by every culture, just sitting on their phone looking at different things. But at that time, it would have been it had to be culture shock, right? Going from Rutgers, Jewish and Catholic students primarily, walking into Chapel Hill, you're walking into the evangelical type world. And the question you get is Jesus coming back next month? Now, that's fascinating and funny because if you know anything about evangelical Christianity, every time you turn around, Jesus is about to come back. The rapture is about to start happening. Someone throws a rock in the Middle East and this is the timeline and prophecy is being fulfilled. And it's just, and it doesn't matter how many times the books are written, how many times the conferences are packed, no matter how many times, it doesn't matter. We may be more sophisticated in giving a specific date now, but it's the same thing when something goes on. Oh, biblical prophecy is being fulfilled. Oh, it's happening now. Oh, here we go. It's always that type of thing. And so that's funny. He walked right into that because if you remember 1988, I bet you he's going to mention it. There was a book written. What was it called? 88 Reasons Why Jesus Will Return in 1988. If I remember, it was something along those lines. And of course, those 88 reasons turned out to all be false because he didn't come back in 1988. Wasn't going to be long that I would find myself in the middle of the next big controversy when Harold Camping for Family Radio told us that Jesus was going to come back in 1994. I still have the book, I think, somewhere downstairs. And so I've seen this happen over and over and over again, and he walked right in to that kind of a world.
So there was a book that was in wide circulation, 2 million copies of this book in circulation called 88 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Occur in 1988.
Okay, I apologize. 88 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Occur in 1988. I knew it was something along those lines. I mean, it's been a long time. I don't remember everything. So, that's the world he walked into. That's the world he walked into. Yeah, we could say a lot about that world. It's the evangelical church culture. It's the evangelical church culture. And in some ways, and I don't know, I'm not saying he's going to frame it this way, but I'm going to frame it this way. Can church culture, the way it works, the way it operates, can it really survive a very academic, a Christianity that's very academic, a Christianity that pursues truth at all costs, a Christianity that will ask the hard questions, struggle. I don't think church culture can survive that. I think that kind of very academic, pursue truth at all costs, with or without offense to friend or foe, ask the difficult questions, struggle. I don't think church culture can survive that, because I think when you start thinking that way, the more you learn, the more you pursue biblical truth and study and hermeneutics and theology and church history, I think the more you pursue that world, you will become an alien and a foreigner to church culture. You're not even going to feel welcome in church culture. Church culture does not want that world, even though it likes to pretend. It only wants that world just enough that it gives you some kind of popular level apologetics so that you can act superior as if you've got all the answers. But you don't really want to dig in to how messy and difficult and complicated and ugly it can get.
And it was widely read, especially in the South. And this fellow, he was a rocket engineer for NASA, so he was a smart guy. He was a fundamentalist Christian, and he had 88 biblical and common sense arguments that Jesus is coming back during Rosh Hashanah, 1988, and and people took him seriously. I had a student in my class that semester whose parents literally sold the farm. It's one reason why religious education is so important, because many people who subscribe to particular religious views are not well educated in them. And so we provide that here. And, when you teach religious studies in the South, it's a terrific topic for the humanities and for the universities. One of the major goals of the university is to get people to think. Teaching religious studies is perfect because most of the students come in with set ideas already.
And it's kind of sad that you need to go to a university to be taught to think, because the church doesn't teach people to think. The church gives people a system, doesn't give people the ability to think. And I think many people who go to church don't have the ability to reason and to think and to challenge. It's just submit to a system, and you look to that system for your answer. It's not about wrestling and struggling. And one of the things I've always tried to do at obviously not great success, since, the church no longer exists, I tried for 20 plus years to get people to think, to use logic, to use reason, to challenge, to struggle. Church is not about that. It's about, here's the system we accept. This is our theological team. This is our theological tribe. You shut up, you color within the lines, and you do not think, even though you pretend that you are, because your thinking can only go within those lines. And then the answer is already given to you by the system. So you really don't have to do a lot of thinking. You can pretend that you're thinking, but all you're going to do is look up the answer from the approved books and the approved reading list of that particular group.
About what you're going to be studying. They have ideas about the Bible. They have views of them. And when they get challenged in class, they're just confronted with something they've got to think about. And so it's not like, my brilliant wife, Sarah, she does teach at Duke. Many of you know that 25 years ago when we got married, the deal was that I agreed to live near Duke campus if she would root for the Tar Heels, which she does. She teaches, she started out as a medievalist, taught Chaucer, and is now one of the leading Shakespeare scholars in the world. She's a Shakespearean. But when her undergraduates take her class, and they're taking a class on Chaucer, these students do not have some kind of fixed idea about the Miller's Tale. right? That you can't disabuse them of, I mean, maybe Hamlet, but maybe not, And so, like, if you're teaching, they don't have any commitment to it. But somebody's taking New Testament in the South, who grew up in schools in the South and in churches in the South and families in the South, and you come in, they realize that there are problems with the New Testament. They've got to deal with it. And so the point is never to convert somebody or to deconvert somebody or to make them change their mind or make them drop their religion or make them believe what you believe. It's not that at all. It's to get them to think.
And that's the thing. If they've been going to church, they shouldn't have any problem when they walk into a Bart Ehrman class. They should be like, I already know all this. I learned about this in Sunday school when I was 10. I know about these issues. I know about these difficulties. My church struggles with it every time we open the Bible. We're not afraid of it. Church is the worst place to go to learn to think. It takes away your ability to think, and it just says submit to a system. It's not about, oh man, okay, we're here in Matthew. We got some things to work. Oh, this is not going to be easy. Okay, we got a mess here. What in the world is going on here? How do we even understand this? Wait a minute. What's this referring to? Wait, what's this? Wait, is there a textual problem here? Wait, is there a translation issue here? What is going on? Well, wait a minute. Jesus says this, but over here it says, oh, that's a problem. That's messy. No. Church is there to say, no. People think that there's problems and difficulties, but it's really quite simple. Here's my 3-point outline, and we'll get out by noon. And make sure you get some points of application and make it sound like a sermon, because I don't want to go to church and sound like I'm in a university classroom. I mean, I've heard all the whining and complaining I just want it to feel like church. What does that even mean? You want a feeling. You want an experience. You don't want to actually go, oh, this is the place where we are confronted with very difficult concepts, and we may leave more confused than we arrived. But but if I want to get that, I leave church and I go to Chapel Hill and take a New Testament class from Bart Ehrman, then I'll find challenge and difficulty and struggle. But it will be done so from the perspective of a skeptic, not from the perspective of those who hold to faith in Christ. Why do I have to leave church to go find a place where I can be challenged to think when church is the place where I go and I'm told to turn off my brain? Even though we claim, no, this is where we really do great thinking. Whatever. Sermons are the enemy of thinking.
And if they've got some reason for what they think, that's great. Okay. But if you don't have any reason for what you think, that's a problem. I often get asked how many times I get phone calls from parents. How many times, do parents are kind of upset that you're leading their children astray, and, how big of a problem is it? And the answer is, I have never gotten a phone call in 37 years, except once. And the once was not somebody complaining about what I was teaching. So, about 30 years ago, teaching a big class, 360 students in this class, New Testament, and is back in the day, some of you who are like my age, remember that you finish a class, like you've taken a class, and the teacher would post the grades outside the door. Remember that? And they blacken out the name, but the people could see what their grade was. So that was that kind of situation. And so I had these sheets of thing outside my door, and with the grades. And I had 6 teaching assistants for this class, and who had small group discussions once a week, and they would do the grading for the students, and then so they did all the grading because it was a big class. I get a phone call 2 days after I posted the grades. Pick up the phone. Person says, Dr. Ehrman, my daughter took your New Testament class this semester, and she failed the class. I would like you to change her grade. I'm sorry. I can't change a grade, because you'd like me to. I'm really sorry, though, that your daughter failed the class. And she started talking to me, and it turns out this woman she ran a vegetable and fruit stand in western North Carolina. That's what she did for a living. And she had saved up money her entire life for her daughter to go to college. And if she failed my class, she'd be dropped out of college. Wow. So I say, well, I'm sorry. What? I can't change a grade. Doctor, I'm just praying to Jesus. You will see it in your heart to change your grade. So what? It's not, I asked her. So what? Okay, I'm not sure. I know your daughter. What's your daughter's name? Gives me the name. I don't know every student in the class. I look it up in the files. I keep the files, and the teaching assistants, they've graded the midterms, and they graded the final, and they've got participation grades, and they got papers during the week, and so they've got all these grades lined up, and then they calculate, what the final grade is, that kind of thing. And it was, 30 years ago. We didn't have Excel spreadsheets or doing, people were doing it by hand. So I looked at the student's record, and I said, I'm sorry, she got a 56 for the class for a final grade, and the passing grade's a 60. Dr. Ehrman, I'm just hoping Jesus will allow you to add 4 points to this grade. I'm sorry, I just can't. I'm sorry, it's not fair to the system, it's not fair to the other student, I can't. So oh God. And so, but then I thought, well, at least I ought to kind of recrunch the numbers and just see. And so the TA that I had that semester, who was this person's TA, was one of the really bright students I've had over the years, who ended up having a very good professional teaching career in a major university. A really bright guy. The thing was, though, he wasn't very good at math. So I recrunched the grades. He was off by 4 points. Absolutely true. I called her up. I don't know what kind of prayer life you got.
Okay, that's pretty funny. That makes me laugh. So, yeah, because if I was the one doing the scoring and you were trusting my math, you probably would have been off by far more than 4 points. So, all right. Where is he going to go with this? It's a funny story, but where is he taking this? I think he's going to try to demonstrate. Or, maybe he's not trying, but he's going to show the difference between kind of a faith church culture versus an academic one. Hey, someone just got the math wrong. It's going to be perceived very different in a faith church kind of culture.
Wow. So that was the only phone call that I ever got from a student. Well, okay. So in classes like that, we are dealing with approaching the New Testament from a historical and a literary point of view, rather than from a faith perspective. And we have a range of people from a range of faith traditions, and some people are very committed to their faith. Some have left their faith. Some are atheists. Some are very conservative evangelicals. Some are Jews. Some are whatever. I mean, Muslims. It's a wide range. But we're approaching these things from historical and literary points of view. And a lot of things we talk about are things they've never heard before in their churches, even if they're going to a fairly mainline church that has a pastor who went to a really good seminary, who's heard all this stuff himself, but doesn't, or herself, and doesn't teach it.
You hear that? Even Bart Ehrman acknowledges it. Even if pastors have gone to seminaries where they've heard all of this stuff, they're not going to teach it in church. Then what's the point of going to the stupid seminary and spending all of that money that when you get to the pulpit, you don't mention any of it, you don't talk about it, you don't deal with it? Because church is a business, and the people want an experience. They want to feel something. So you take all of that education, you flush it, and you show up and you perform every Sunday to give people a sense of a little spirituality, a little bit of Jesus, from kind of a devotional, experiential mindset, and all of that stuff that you learned in seminary, and all of those things you struggled with, you just leave it alone. because now you just shut up, put on the little clown suit, and do your little dance, and everyone will be happy. The money will keep coming in. You keep a job. The doors stay open. You may get a bigger building. You may get a bigger housing allowance. You may get a bigger car allowance, and everyone will be happy playing this little religious game. And that's what drives me nuts. Someone needs to burn that system to the stinking ground. But if you try, the only thing that's going to get burned to the ground is going to be you, because that system is not going away. People don't want to walk into church and get confronted with all of the issues and difficulties and complexities and well, I don't know what is going on here. I don't have a clue. What's happening? No. Frame it all in the most pious, spiritual language possible. Turn it into moralism. Give some practical lessons. Throw in fun, food, friendship, community, encouragement, positive ways of thinking, and then you're good to go. If you come in with a different mindset and a different approach, you're going to get thrown to the curb. Now, you may be able to have a ministry going this other approach, but it's going to be a parachurch ministry outside the church because the church itself doesn't want that kind of thing.
So with that, all that said, I want to get into of all the things that are involved with teaching biblical studies. What do I consider to be the most significant discovery ever made in its history, in the history of the discipline? That's what I want to talk about. So, our flawed manuscripts.
He wants to talk about the most significant discovery and the teaching of this subject. That's interesting. And now, what do you think is the most significant discovery? In biblical studies, what do you think is the most significant discovery? What discovery do you think he's going to give? Go ahead and write down your thoughts, write down your ideas. We may not even get to his answer. Maybe we will, maybe we will not. But he's going to start with our flawed manuscripts. Oh boy. Our flawed manuscripts. Are you ready? Here we go.
Here's our situation when it comes. I'm going to be talking right now about the New Testament. I'm going to stick most of this to the New Testament because it's my main field of expertise. Whoever wrote the books of the New Testament, the various books, wrote them at some time, mainly in the first century. And you just take an example, like whoever wrote the Gospel of Matthew sat down at one point and wrote it out, maybe around the year 80 or 85. He wrote his Gospel. He had other sources, but he wrote something down on papyrus, and that was sometime in the first century. And you can call that the original thing, the thing he wrote, and that he started passing around for people to look at. And then after a while, somebody wanted a copy of it, right? And so somebody made a copy of it, and then somebody copied the copy. And then somebody copied the copy of the copy. And then somebody copied the copy of the copy of the copy. And it went on like that. It went on like that for centuries. And that thing that the person wrote doesn't exist anymore. And neither do the first copies. Or the copies of the copies. We don't have a full copy of Matthew until about 300 years after it was written. Okay? So that's just the way it is. And that's not like unique for the New Testament. That's like all the books of the ancient world are like that. It's just how it was. And so you don't have originals, you've got later copies. The problem is that scribes make mistakes. And sometimes they're sleepy or inattentive or they're bored or whatever, and they leave out a word.
Now make sure what he is saying here, and I want to make that, because I want to be very clear here. What he is saying here, everyone who's ever gone to church should know this. Everyone should know this. Whoever wrote the original, then the copy was made, and a copy of a copy was made, then a copy of the copy of the copy was made, then a copy of the copy of the copy of the copy was made, and the original is long gone, and we do not have the original. Anyone who's been to church for 5 minutes should know that. Everyone should know that. That should be explained. You could explain it to kids. All right, here. Someone write this down. All right, now someone copy that. 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 Now take the original, throw it away. We don't have the original of the Bible. That Bible you have in your hand is not the original. It's a copy of 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 a copy. Now he says that, I think he says it's about 300 years is when we get our first copy of Matthew. Now, if we have the Gospel of Matthew, I think we have, is it called Papyrus? I think it's Papyrus 104, something along those lines. And it's usually dated around 150 to 200 AD, all right? Now, that's not the full copy of Matthew. That's only fragments, okay? I think it only has a few verses. I think it's Matthew 24. It only has a few verses of Matthew 20 or Matthew 21. Did I say 24? Matthew 21. All right. Then we have, I think we have another one that has small portions of Matthew 26. And I think that's around, is it Papyrus? I think it's 64, Papyrus 64, Papyrus 67, something along those lines. And it's around 175 to 225. So we have parts of Matthew 21, parts of Matthew 26. And then we have, I think, Papyrus 45, which is around 200, 250 AD. It's larger sections, but it's still incomplete. So we do have, how can we say it, fragments before 300. But the first complete or near complete Matthew would be Codex Sinaiticus. I can't remember how you say it. Sinaiticus. That's around 330 to 360. And then Codex, I think, Vaticanus is around 300 as well. So, you have two codexes around 300 that are complete. They basically contain the entire the entirety of Matthew. So you have papyrus that are earlier, but it's only, I think it's Matthew 21. I think it's Matthew 21, Matthew 26, and then larger portions later. I don't remember which portions are there. Then you have Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. And that's between 330, 360, 300, 325. Then you get the complete. So if you want to complete, the first complete copy of Matthew that we have is dated around 300. All right. Now I'm going from memory, trying to get that as correct as possible. I don't have everything in front of me. I could look some things up to see if I'm being accurate, but I think I'm being somewhat accurate. So when he says that, just some people will say, but we have these other, we have portions, but if you want a complete copy of Matthew, you're talking around 300. All right. That means the original is long gone. The original is long gone. There's no way to take the copy and go back to the original and say, see, we can check both. No, you cannot. All you can do is take everything that we have and say, we feel confident that this is what the original had, but we don't have the original. I cannot stress that enough. Everyone who goes to church has to acknowledge that.
Copy the same word twice, or they'll leave out a sentence, or they'll copy the same sentence twice. Sometimes they'll copy the whole page twice. I mean, it's just like you're tired, right? You're in this body, it's like, And so they make mistakes, and sometimes apparently it looks like they change things because they thought they weren't worded correctly. Yeah, there was something wrong here, and they changed it to correct it. And the problem is, it's hard to know. Like if you've got two forms of the text, right? You've got a verse that's worded in two different ways. Suppose you're a scribe and you're copying this. You think, well, that's wrong. I need to correct it, and then you correct it, but you correct it in a way that's incorrect. Right? You're not correcting it to the original, you're correcting it to something else. Now you got three forms of the text, right? Three were, oh my God. And so it goes on like that for centuries, so it's a problem.
And it is a problem. No one can get around it. So I did look it up. All right, so let me, so here's what I know. All right, so I can be pretty dogmatic now. Gospel of Matthew, Papyrus 104 It's dated 150 to 200, and it contains, it's a small fragment, just a few verses of Matthew 21. So I was right about that. Papyrus 6467. This is somewhere between 175 to 225. Only small portions of Matthew 26. Papyrus 45, 200 to 225. Large portions, but incomplete. And I don't know, what I looked up did not give me which portions are there. Then Codex Sinaiticus, 330 to 360. Now I'm looking at it. Codex Sinaiticus, 330 to 360. Codex Vaticanus, 300 to 325. Those contain the first essentially complete New Testaments, including Matthew. That's roughly Matthew written around 80 to 90 AD, which is what I think most scholars would say. And the complete copy is 325 to 350. So 240 to 270 years later. So saying 300 is a roundabout. It's not completely accurate. So it would be more accurate to say we don't get a complete copy of Matthew to about 270 years after the original. After the original disappeared. Now we have fragments, and we want Bible scholars and anyone else out there looking and digging and seeing whatever partial fragments we can find, because the more fragments you find, then you can say, well, this fragment, this looks like this looks like this looks like this. And then you start giving yourself a certain level of certainty of what the original originally said. But let me make it very clear. Nobody has the original. Nobody. That's a fact. I don't care how much that disrupts your little small group coffee meeting. Nobody has the original. And people made copies of copies of copies of copies. And when the more manuscripts you find, many cases you find these variants. Well, this fragment says this. This fragment says it this way. What happened? And then sometimes you can determine, well, we think whoever was copying this, whichever scribe was copying this, it sounds like he did this, and you have to start trying to make assumptions of what was happening and what was going on. That's all you can do.
The first time this is really recognized as a major problem was in the year 1707. An English scholar named John Mill, not related to John Stuart Mill, the Victorian. John Mill was a biblical scholar. In 1707, he published an edition of the Greek New Testament where he gave the wording of the New Testament. At the bottom of the page, he listed the differences that he had found among his manuscripts. Those are called textual variants. A variant is a variant way of reading a passage. And so he had access to about 100 manuscripts of the New Testament had for their texts, and he compared these 100 manuscripts. And to the shock and dismay of many of his readers, he uncovered 30,000 places of variation. And he told them he hadn't included all that he found, just the important ones.
Now, 30,000 variations. All right? 30,000 variations. Okay, I'm looking something up because I don't have some of the manuscripts I can memorize and remember, but some of this I will not know. All right. So let's go through a couple of things here. A variant simply means any place where two manuscripts differ. You need to know this, all right? So 30,000 variations, 30,000 variants, okay? That sounds like the end of the world. And at the same time, I look, on one hand, I don't want to minimize it, right? Because 30,000 variations, that's crazy, all right? So don't minimize it. On the other hand, we have to be able to define what do we mean by a variant. A variant means any place where two manuscripts differ. Not necessarily contradictions, not theological changes, not missing books, just any difference at all. That means it can be something like, this one says Jesus Christ, but this one says Christ Jesus. This one says John, John, but this one says John, Jon, no H. So it can be a spelling change. It can be a change in word order. Each counts as a separate variant. So each counts as a separate variant. And again, this should be demonstrated to kids right from Sunday school, homeschool. If you're going at it from a religious perspective, your kids should understand, hey, here was Matthew. We don't get a copy till almost 300. Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, it's around 300. That's when we get our complete copy. But when you start looking at manuscripts, you get these variants. How did these variants occur? And just make sure they know the original is gone. But when you start seeing these variants and you get this number of 30,000, you just have to remember some of these variations are not going to have an impact on anything. John, Jon. I think you're going to be able to figure out that's John. All right. Jesus Christ versus Christ Jesus. I think you're going to be able to know that's about Jesus, right? Spelling change, word order. That doesn't mean that's the end of the world. Now, it doesn't mean you ignore that. It just means that they are there. Now, the fact that they are there has to at least make you acknowledge this. The copies then were not always perfect. The copies introduced mistakes and changes and word orders. How serious is that? That's a different thing. But don't say, well, it's every word. No. Every word is not the same. You've got to be very careful the claim you make. In the original, okay, you can make any claim you want about the original. You don't have the original to be able to prove that, disprove that. You can say whatever you want about the original because you don't have it. Right? So you can say whatever you want about it, right? But there's no way you can prove it. So some things we have to acknowledge by faith, this is what I believe. But by proof, this is what I know. These manuscripts have all kinds of variations. Now in 1707, John Mill, he compared 100 Greek manuscripts. He noted every difference and he found somewhere around 30,000 differences. All right. But just remember, if one spelling mistake appears in 50 manuscripts, that counts as 50 variants. It does not count as one. So the number explodes fast. All right. So if we go through how significant these 30,000 are, most likely the vast majority, and we have to be honest with this, and I don't care. And again, I'm not here to defend any team. I don't care if I'm defending Bart Ehrman or going against Bart Ehrman. Most of these are spelling differences. They movable, like a Greek particle, in the Greek, okay? Word order, and Greek word order is flexible. I think most Greek scholars would acknowledge that. Synonyms, accidental duplication. Let's just make it very clear. All of those kinds of changes does not impact the meaning in any way, shape, or form. Everyone has to acknowledge that. All right. So, I mean, you get basically no meaning. Now, there are a number. I don't know if we could say it, a small number, tiny number that affect meanings, right? For example, and you know some of these, the longer ending of Mark. Where is that? Some people don't even believe it belongs there. The woman caught in adultery. Many people believe it doesn't even belong there. There's some Christological phrases, right? But almost all of these are identifiable. And most anyone who has a good study Bible, they're actually marked in the modern Bibles. They're not hidden. They're not like, ooh, shh, don't tell anyone. They're right there. And everyone in church should know every single significant one. And when a pastor gets ready to preach it, he should acknowledge the difficulty. He should say, this woman caught in adultery, we don't even know if this really belongs there. Now, I know that's the problem. Because the minute I can say, hey, this woman caught in adultery in John, I don't know if it belongs there. I don't know if it really belongs there. Then ladies and gentlemen, what have you just done? Well, if I can't trust that story, how did we get a story in here that may not belong? How do we get this longer ending to Mark that may not belong? How do we get, if we get any kind of things in here that doesn't belong, see, then it's very difficult to stand on a stage and say, what I hold in my hand is the inerrant, infallible, perfect word of God without mistake. Well, and then all Dr. Bart Ehrman has to say is, yeah, that John chapter 8 there with the woman caught in adultery, yeah, that doesn't belong. Oh, that ending to Mark, no, that doesn't belong. You see that verse right there? That's not actually, no. You see, there are 30,000 variants, and then all of a sudden, your claim becomes looking very suspicious. That's where we have to be very careful with the claims that we make and drawing a distinction between the original documents and all of the copies that were made. And what we have to also acknowledge is we can look at all the copies, but we cannot dogmatically pull out the original and go, well, that matches, because we can't. All right? So, and this is very important to realize. You get more variants with the more manuscripts. On one hand, having countless manuscripts is a good thing. We love having, we've got 5,000 manuscripts. We've got 10,000 manuscripts. But just note, for every new manuscript discovered, you introduce new variants. It's a double-edged sword. We have all of these manuscripts, and we have now more variants. Okay? If you only had 3 manuscripts, you would only have few variants. If you have 5,800 plus manuscripts, you get tons. We get think of it this way. We get more variants because we have more evidence. That doesn't mean corruption. It just means more because more manuscripts is more evidence, right? The more manuscripts you get, the more you can piece them together and go, ooh, look. Oh, we've got consistency. Oh, look. This seems to be, I think we got a pretty good idea that this probably would have been the original, considering we've got this many thousand of manuscripts and they all seem to be saying very similar same things. I think we can have some confidence. So this is what we can say when it comes to I have a copy here, right here in front of me. What I have in my hand is a copy, right? I don't have the original. I have a copy. I think we can reconstruct the New Testament with high confidence. I think we can say that we can, some may say 95% certain, 99% certain. Now, here's the problem. When Christians get into an argument with Bart Ehrman, they'll make their thesis, we have the perfect, preserved, inerrant word of God without error. Well, all you got to do is demonstrate a few possible problems and your thesis falls apart. Bart Ehrman wins the debate. That's why I can't stand when Christians engage in these debates, not understanding that the thesis statement you've already lost. All we can say is we have great certainty that what we have is 90, 95, 97, 98%. We feel confident that it's close to the original. I can't be 100% because I can't produce the original because the original is gone. So don't overstate your claim if you're going to get into a debate with Bart Ehrman, because he knows all of these variants, just like you should know all of these variants. So when we hear 30,000 variants, don't get all defensive. Don't get all mad. That doesn't mean 30,000 contradictions. It means 30,000 differences. And most of those are spelling and grammar and don't change the meaning at all. All right? Now, it can raise suspicion, it can raise question, it can raise doubt, as I've already said. Well, wait a minute. If the story in John 8 doesn't belong there, that makes me question everything. And I understand that. Wait, if I got 30,000 different variants, well, even if we don't believe they're completely significant, how do I know there aren't things that are significant? And you know why I don't know if they're significant or not significant? I don't have the original to know. If I had the original, I may be like, oh, dear goodness, where did this come from? It's not even found in the original. But I can't do that. We have to be honest with that at the same time.
Oh, okay. That elicited a response. A number of people claimed that he was trying to make the text of the New Testament uncertain and that it was a satanic ploy. His supporters pointed out he didn't invent these places of variation. He just noticed they exist. Well, okay, so today we have more than 100 manuscripts.
Now make sure you understand that, okay? Because as soon as you point out the variants, you're almost viewed as being of Satan. That's the church's tactic. If anything causes questions, if anything causes doubts, if anything causes challenges, the church circles its wagons and going, it must be Satan. It must be a satanic plot. Grab the ropes and let's hang some witches in Salem. That's the church's always go-to. No, it's called questions. It's called, I don't know, I've got these 100 Greek manuscripts and I see all of these differences. That's not satanic. That's called thinking, logic, and reason. But Bart Ehrman's about to say we have far more than 100 manuscripts. Yes, we do.
Today, we know of over 5,800 manuscripts. How many variants do we know about? We know so... How many do we know about? We don't know how many we know about. My teacher at Princeton Theological Seminary, Bruce Metzger, used to say, we have more variants in our manuscripts than we have words in the New Testament. And the recent estimates are around 500,000 differences. Having said that, most of these differences simply show that ancient scribes could spell no better than students can today.
No, and that is true. When we went to the debate at Dallas Theological Seminary, I remember one of the men, I said, all it's going to take is Bart Ehrman's going to get up here and he's just going to say we have more textual variants than we have words in the New Testament. And he's like, well, he can't say that. That's not true. Well, he said it. And guess what? Dr. Wallace and I believe Dr. James White both had to acknowledge that we have more variants than we have words in the New Testament. That's a fact. You may not like it, but it's a fact. Now, but see what Bart Ehrman is doing? He's acknowledging that most of these are insignificant. So we do have to know that as well. So we just got to be honest with it. On one hand, it raises questions and doubts, and anyone should have questions and doubts. At the same time, it should be amazing that we've got over 5,000 manuscripts. That's amazing because the more manuscripts, the more you can start piecing things together to go. I think we have a high level of confidence that what we have would have to be pretty close to the original. That's great. Now, we also have the problem of all these variants. Okay, we don't hide from that. We acknowledge it and we deal with it and we struggle with it. And on the ones that don't matter, we don't get caught up on those. But if there's any that could possibly change the meaning of the text, ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to run from it. We're going to face it. And we're going to talk about it in church and in Sunday school.
You misspell a word, it's a difference. So most of them don't matter, but some of them matter a lot. Some of them actually change what a verse means, or what a chapter means, or what a book means. Sometimes they change the theology of the whole thing. It's, that really does matter. But that's not the most significant discovery in the history of biblical scholarship.
Okay. So that's not the most significant discovery in biblical scholarship. That's not the most significant discovery. It's not. Now, it's a significant discovery. He doesn't believe it's the most significant. And we're going to find out what the most significant is, well, next time. You have to come back. You have to tune in to the Theology Central podcast so we can find out what the most significant discovery is. But if for some of you, the most significant discovery is understanding textual variants. You need to know how they work. You need to understand them. And you don't need to just dismiss them. Sometimes we're like, what in the world is going on? And he's right. Sometimes they are significant. And when you run into a significant one, you don't hide from it. You face it head on. And you know what you may have to do? I don't know. I don't have a clue. I don't get it. It possibly changes the entire meaning. It could be this, it could be that. Okay, what's the majority of evidence? Which direction does it point us? How should we handle this? What should we do? And you don't hide from it. You don't run from it. You embrace it, and you embrace the confusion and the difficulty. And you know what? It's perfectly okay. I know this is anathema to many Christians. It's okay to say, you know what? I don't know. It may not make any sense. We may never, ever know. Why? Because the manuscripts have variants. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish I could go right now and run to some museum and pull out the original Matthew, the original Mark, the original Luke, the original John, the original Acts, Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians. I wish I could pull out the entire New Testament originally as it was written. And then we could say, you know what? We don't even need all these manuscripts. Throw them all away. We've got the original. This is what the original says. Then we could put together a translation that perfectly represents word for word the original. And then we could, now I don't think it would still fix anything because Christians are still going to disagree because we can't even, on even the things we do know what it says, we can't agree on it. So I don't know if it would fix anything, but it sure would be better and end all of this argument, right? But we don't have the original, ladies and gentlemen. They are gone. We do not have the originals. We do not have the originals. We have copies of copies of copies of copies of copies. You take all of those copies together, you acknowledge thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of variants. Oh, that's frustrating. Okay, but we can start reconstructing going, if all of these manuscripts seem to be pretty close to giving us what this says, we can be pretty confident that, the original had to be close to this, or all of these copies, there would be massive, it would be one thing if all of these copies were radically different, but they're not radically different. They just have variants in them. And again, most of the variants are minute and they don't impact anything. So on one hand, you don't want to play this is the difficult trying to get Christians to be balanced here. Many just dismiss the variants like they don't matter. No, you've got to acknowledge, the copies can have major problems in them. The copies could have additions that weren't in the original or could have subtractions that weren't in the original. All we can do is try to say we can have a certain level of confidence. So once we get a certain level of confidence, that's how we have to state it. And then we can say, here are the passages where we run into major problems. Typically, a good Bible and good commentaries will point them out. What's frustrating is that most good sermons don't. There we have it. All right, we're going to have to hit freeze everyone in place. And next time, we'll come back and we'll get to maybe what the most significant discovery has been. It's not the variants, because that everyone should know that. So what's the most significant discovery? What do you think it is? We'll find out next time. Thanks for listening. God bless.